Matthew chapter 6, verse 24. No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. Brothers and sisters, the words are clear as daylight after a long night. Two masters, one heart. Only one can be Lord. Some of us don't bow at a golden calf. We bow at the spinning wheel, the flashing app, the promise that one more bet will finally fix the last one. We don't kneel at an altar. We kneel to the odds. And the odds are terrible gods. Hear me with love. Gambling doesn't start in the casino. It starts in the heart. It is the fantasy of control, the whisper that chance will do what character cannot, that luck will do what labor will not, that probability will carry you where prayer and patience are too slow. But Jesus steps into our hurry and our hunger and speaks a better word. John chapter 10, verse 10. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. The thief steals in 1,000 ways, through screens that never sleep, through bonuses baited with fine print, through a culture that calls compulsion a hobby. He steals savings and Sabbaths, marriages and midnights, trust and tomorrow. And Jesus? He doesn't offer dopamine. He offers deliverance. He doesn't offer a rush. He offers a resurrection. Brothers and sisters, some of you are carrying the quiet panic of a balance you cannot pay, a promise you cannot keep, a browser history you cannot bear. Your hands shake at the end of the month. Your eyes burn at the end of the night. I'll win it back, you say, and the pit gets deeper. Hear the invitation of the Savior. Matthew chapter 11, verse 28. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Not more adrenaline. Rest. Not more noise. Rest. Not more chances. Rest. Let me speak to the heart beneath the habit. Gambling dresses itself like hope, but it feeds on fear. Fear that the future won't be enough. Fear that you aren't enough. Fear that if you sit still, you will feel the ache you've been outrunning. But Jesus does not shame the aching. He meets it. He names it. He heals it. Luke chapter 12, verse 15. Take care, and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. Your life is not your net worth. Your worth is not your last win. You are not the sum of your successes or your slips. You are the one the shepherd came to find. Anchor this in your bones. The house always wins, but the cross already did. You can't beat the odds, but you can bow to the one who broke the grave. You can't outcalculate compulsion, but you can receive a new heart. Jesus doesn't negotiate with your chains. He breaks them. Some of you say, "Preacher, I've tried to quit." I believe you. The flesh is strong in its weakness, but the Lord does not command what he won't empower. He begins not with a pep talk, but with a pardon. Luke chapter 19, verse 10. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. If you are lost in the labyrinth of wagers and lies, good news. He knows the way out, and he knows your name. Let's talk about turning. Repentance is not a sad feeling. It is a strong decision. It is not a vague apology. It is a new direction. It is not just, "I'm sorry I lost." It is, "I'm done serving this master." And repentance is not a lonely road. Jesus places us in a people. Freedom grows where confession is safe, where accountability is normal, where prayer is oxygen, where practical steps are holy. Picture with me the long drive home from the far country. Luke chapter 15, verse 20. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion and ran. God is not waiting with arms crossed to tally your losses. He is running to cover you with his mercy, to clothe you with dignity, to call you son, to call you daughter. The only thing faster than your losses is the Father's love. Now, brothers and sisters, we must not only feel conviction, we must practice wisdom. Jesus speaks of drastic mercy for drastic sin. He said, if your hand causes you to sin, cut it off. He was not calling us to harm our bodies, but to take ruthless steps for the sake of our souls. So let's translate obedience into Tuesday morning. Delete the apps. Close the accounts. Opt into every self-exclusion list you can find. Change the passwords. Give them to someone you trust. Cancel the trip. Skip the tournament. Refuse the watch party where the prop bets pass like candy. Put your finances in the light. A budget with your spouse or a trusted friend. A counselor who won't be impressed by excuses. A group where your name is known and your story is safe. Find a pastor, a priest, an elder. Bring your secrets to the foot of the cross and to the ears of the church. And then, build what sin tried to burn. Matthew chapter 7, verses 24 and 25. Everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall. Gambling builds on sand, fantasy, fluctuation, fog. Christ teaches us to pour concrete, honesty, hard work, generosity, patience. Freedom is not a jackpot. It is a daily yes. Some of you will say, what about the debt? What about the people I wounded? The gospel doesn't erase consequences. It redeems them. Grace does not make mortgages vanish or trust magically return. Grace gives you a new mind and new muscles for a long obedience. And the church, if we are the church, will walk with you. We will celebrate small wins. We will forgive 70 times 7. We will help you call the creditor, write the apology, visit the counselor, confess to your children without collapsing. We will be here when you fall and when you rise. Brothers and sisters, let me lay down a few short anchors for your heart. The bet is a lie. The cross tells the truth. The rush fades. The peace remains. Luck takes. Jesus gives. Secrecy rots. Confession heals. You cannot serve two masters. Choose your master today. And to the one shaking right now, hearing the echo of the lobby and the chime of the notification, I speak not condemnation, but invitation. Mark chapter 8, verse 36. For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? What does it profit to hit one parlay and lose your marriage? To catch one streak and lose your son's trust? To light up 1 week and darken your future? There is a better profit. Peace with God, peace with people, a clean conscience, a steady life. If you are ready to turn, let's pray in plain words. Jesus, I am tired of serving a cruel master. I renounce this idol. Forgive me. Clean me. Give me a new heart. Give me courage to tell the truth. Give me the humility to ask for help. Lead me to your people. Teach my hands to work and my heart to rest in you. I belong to you. Now take the next step tonight, before the sun sets. Tell one person the truth. Delete what needs deleting. Put your money in the light. Make an appointment with a pastor. Come to the altar and let us lay hands on you and bless you in Jesus' name. There is no shame in surrender. There is only freedom. And tomorrow, when you wake to hope. The Father already ran to meet you. The Son already paid what you could not. The Spirit already lives in you to will and to work. Brothers and sisters, let this be the day you stop rolling the dice and start carrying the cross. The cross is not a burden that breaks you. It is a yoke that fits you. The Savior who calls you also keeps you. Choose your master. Choose life. Preach is over. I have a story to tell you. He built success like a careful house. Each beam measured, each invoice paid, each morning earlier than the last. Michael Hart's company. Trucks rolled out before dawn, steel ladders flashing in the streetlights, coffee steam curling in the cab. He started with a toolbox and a borrowed van. By 40, he had 6 crews, a small warehouse on the edge of town, and a framed photo of his wife, Rachel, and their daughter, Lily, on his desk. In the picture, Lily's gap-toothed smile held a pink snow cone. Rachel's hand rested on Michael's shoulder as if it belonged there. And it did. The first bet was a joke. $20 on a Saturday game while he waited for sheetrock to be delivered. A teammate at the rec league had sent him a link. Free bet. Fireworks and confetti. It landed like a spark on dry grass. There was a small win. Then a bigger one. Then a loss that felt like a dare. The app learned his pulse. It pushed odds during lunch, parlays on the drive home, second half lines as he brushed his teeth. He told himself it was harmless motivation, a way to make sports interesting. He told himself lies in fluent English. When the market dipped and one contractor delayed paying, the app promised an answer. Just a heater. Cover payroll till the check clears. He stayed up late, researching. A man reading tea leaves that looked like numbers. Monday came, and the parlay missed by 1 point. Always 1 point. He doubled down to win the loss, then doubled again to fix the double. Money moved faster than drywall. Shame moved faster than money. Rachel noticed first in the absences. Michael wasn't at dinner. He wasn't at bedtime. He was in the garage. Inventory. He slept with his phone under the pillow and flinched when it buzzed. He snapped at Lily for leaving her bike behind the truck. He didn't laugh when the dog knocked over a trash bag and wore the lid like a hat. The house felt like a place where weather gathered. He put a second card on auto pay, just for a month. He took a small personal loan. Bridge money, he said. He borrowed $5,000 from Jared, the foreman who had stood beside him since year 1. 2 weeks, Michael promised. And Jared said okay, because loyalty is a door we open too widely for those we love. The crash was not cinematic. It was an email from the bank at 6:11 a.m. It was a notice on the back door from the utility company. It was a client who chose another bid because Michael was late. Again. It was Rachel's question. Steady and terrible. Are we okay? It was his answer. Slippery and small. Just a tight month. Truth finally arrived with numbers. On a Tuesday that looked like any other, Michael sat alone at the office computer and added the damage he could no longer refuse to see. $12,700 on one card, $18,300 on another, $9,400 on a third he had opened in a parking lot, a $22,000 personal loan, 2 payrolls floated on an overdraft, $5,000 owed to Jared, 2 months behind on the mortgage after he forgot to mail a check, and the app, open tabs of wagers, like windows into a storm. The total on the screen stared back. $128,400 he could name, not counting the interest coming like a tide. He printed the sheets and drove home too fast. The printer ink smeared on his thumb. He put the stack on the kitchen table like a confession. Rachel read, silently at first. Then with a sound he would remember in sleep. She did not throw anything. She did not scream. She spoke slowly, as if holding a fragile thing. "You lied." He nodded. "How long?" He told her pieces of the truth that most protected him. She saw it, and he saw her see it. For a week they tried to talk around it, as if grief were a room they could circle without entering. Lily asked why Dad looked like he had a cold all the time. The crews missed him. Clients heard rumors. Shame smelled like sweat and stale coffee. When Rachel finally packed a suitcase, it was not dramatic. She placed Lily's school sweater on top, a hairbrush, the dog's leash. "We're going to my sister's for a while," she said, and a while was a line that divided before and after. Michael stayed in the too-quiet house and tallied the losses again, as if repetition might make them smaller. He tried one more bet, just one, to start the comeback. He lost. The next morning, he drove to the office and found Jared waiting by the door, hands in pockets. "You could have told me," Jared said. Michael handed him an envelope with $800 cash, everything in the desk, and whispered, "I'm sorry." "That's not the same as paying me back," Jared replied, not cruel, not cold, just true. It was Gloria, the bookkeeper with a Bible in her purse, who told him where to go. She didn't preach. She invited. "There's a church 2 blocks over," she said. "They have a noon prayer. It's quiet. You don't have to talk." Michael drove there on fumes and sat in the back row, hands knotted, eyeing the exit. The room smelled like lemon oil and old wood. A woman at the front read softly about rest for the weary, about a yoke that fits. He didn't understand most of it. He understood the sentence. "We're glad you're here." After the prayer, Michael stood to leave and found himself face to face with the woman who had read. "I'm Elena," she said. "If you need to breathe, there's a little chapel down the hall. No one will bother you." He nodded, aimed for the door she'd indicated, and stepped into a smaller room washed with colored light. There was a wooden booth along the wall, a remnant from another tradition, thin and dark with a little lattice window. He didn't know the rules. He only knew he needed to say the truth to someone who would not fall apart. He slid in and waited. A soft voice on the other side said, "You can speak." And Michael did. He stacked words like the bills he could not pay. The apps, the lies, the cards, the debt, the night he yelled at Lily, the envelope for Jared that wasn't $5,000 but should have been, the 15 minutes he had considered driving until the gas and the road and his name ran out. The voice listened, really listened, and then spoke a sentence that sounded like water. "You are not your worst decision." There was counsel. Practical. Plain. Turn the apps off. Tell someone everything. Bring your numbers into the light. You will need help. We will help you. When he left the chapel, the sky looked different. Not brighter, but honest. Elena found him in the hallway. "We have a group on Thursday nights," she said. "Men who are rebuilding. No one there is impressed with anybody. You can come and say nothing, or you can come and say everything." Michael felt the old impulse rise, to fix it alone, to win it back. But the words from the booth had soaked into him. "You will need help. We will help you." He nodded once, like a man signing his name. The next day, he drove to Rachel's sister's house with a folder labeled "Debt" in black marker. He did not ask her to come home. He did not offer a plan too neat to be real. He told the whole truth, and then asked for the chance to make amends slowly, She listened with the guarded kindness of someone protecting a child. "I'm filing," she said finally. "I can't live like this." He nodded. "I understand." When he walked back to the truck, he felt both lighter and lonelier than he had ever felt. That night, Michael sat at the kitchen table and wrote 3 letters. One to Jared, one to his crews, one to Lily for the day she would be old enough to read it. He ended each the same way. "I am going to live in the light now." He powered down the phone, deleted the apps, and put the passwords in an envelope taped shut with Gloria's signature across the seam. On Thursday, he walked back through the church doors and into a room where a circle of men sat on folding chairs. No one was impressed with anybody. That was the beginning of the long road. Chairs scraped. A coffee pot hissed. A man with a crew cut and a wedding ring turned sideways on his finger said, "Name's Ben. I relapsed last month." Another man, Ray, a math teacher, said, "I spend summers hiding from baseball because I can't watch without wanting to pick a line." Laughter, merciful and small, passed around like bread. Michael said, "I'm Mike," and let the quiet come. No one rescued him from it. No one rushed him. When he finally spoke, it was not a speech, just a sentence. "I lost my house on sand." Ben nodded like a man who remembered the tide. Elena didn't lead. She hovered at the edge like a lamppost. The rules were simple and strange in their goodness. Tell the truth. Take responsibility. One day at a time. No fixing each other. Pray before and after. They prayed with words that weren't fancy. "God, help us. God, keep us." A deacon named Paul closed the circle with a verse that sounded like a door opening. Matthew, chapter 5, verse 6. "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied." The next morning, Michael began a new kind of work. He called a non-profit credit counselor whose office was in a strip mall between a nail salon and a thrift store. The woman on the phone, Veronica, talked about a debt management plan like it was a roadmap, not magic. They listed every creditor, every APR, every minimum. She said words he could live inside. "No more new debt. Close the accounts. We'll try to lower interest. You'll make one payment to us. We'll pay them. You will hate the first 3 months. Then it will feel like breathing again." Veronica got one card from 22% down to 8%. Another refused. The personal loan would not budge. The overdraft had to be cleared in full. She circled a number on a yellow pad. 300 right at 80. His new monthly payment for 48 months. He stared at the number the way a hiker stares at a mountain. "You can do hard things," she said. And he believed her because her voice had the rasp of someone who'd done them. He sold the base boat he had used 3 times. He sold the second truck and learned to plan routes with one. He canceled the sports package. He returned a pair of boots he didn't need. He took 2 Saturday jobs framing and a Tuesday and Thursday night shift at the supplier's warehouse unloading pallets. He kept Sundays for church and Lily. He called Jared. "I owe you 5, Michael said. "I will pay you 5 plus 1, monthly." Jared was quiet long enough to count as wisdom. "I'll take your plan," he said, "but I won't take excuses." Michael wrote the schedule on a card and taped it above his desk. Jared, $150 week until paid in full plus $1,000. He moved his accounts to a bank with no overdraft protection, no trap disguised as cushion. He put $1,000 in a savings account called Tire and Tooth for flats and dentists, so fear would stop whispering at every inconvenience. He took an envelope and wrote groceries. He took another and wrote gas. He handed the debit card to Gloria on Mondays and got it back on Fridays. Shame felt less like a cloak and more like a tool. sharp enough to remember, dull enough not to cut him open. Lily's visits were supervised at first. Playground benches with Rachel hovering nearby. He packed apple slices, the good kind of markers, and the patience to let his daughter talk about small things. He never mentioned the app, the parlay, the heater he almost caught. He asked about her art, her teacher, the dog's new trick. Trust does not germinate when shouted at. It grows in a long light. Divorce papers came like winter. Michael signed in a courthouse hallway that smelled faintly of floor cleaner and old paper. He walked out into a sky that was shocking in its ordinary blue. He drove to the church and sat in the little chapel where wood held the fingerprints of 100 years. Elena slid into the pew behind him and let the silence keep them. When she spoke, it was with a gentleness that did not cheat the truth. Jesus, in Luke chapter 4, verse 18, said he came to bind up the brokenhearted and set captives free. She didn't add a sermon. She handed him a small index card with 2 words. Keep building. He did. He made coffee for the Thursday group and learned the names of men who taught him how to live. Ray, who put his phone in a safe at the school office during March Madness. Ben, who called his sponsor from the parking lot when he felt his pulse jump. Deacon Paul, who texted him every morning at 6:03. Rock, not sand. He found a Gamblers Anonymous meeting in a community center with a failing air conditioner. At 90 days, he got a chip the color of sunrise. It weighed almost nothing and felt like a brick. Money moved, slowly, stubbornly, in the right direction. The number on Veronica's sheet ticked down like a stubborn thermometer. He paid Jared the last $1,000 plus the extra. He brought it in cash and counted it out on a workbench that smelled like pine. You don't have to count it, Jared said. I know your math now. They laughed in the easy way men laugh when the hard thing is over. Jared slid the rubber band back to Michael. Give 1,000 to somebody who needs it when you're strong enough. Michael nodded, not because he had the money, but because he had the intention. He learned to bless what he could not keep. Months after the courthouse, Rachel met someone at her sister's church. A kind man with a steady job and a way of listening that did not make conversation into a contest. Michael found out from Lily first. Mom's friend is named Mark, she said, chewing a straw. He smiled the way a man smiles when he is teaching his face to tell the truth. He drove to the chapel again. The booth felt smaller this time because his pain had grown honest enough to fill it. What do I do? He asked the voice on the other side. You pray blessing, the voice said. Matthew, chapter 5, verse 9. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. You keep your promises. You show up. You don't poison the well. You forgive 70 times 7, including yourself. The counsel didn't taste sweet. It tasted like medicine. He swallowed. He found new rhythms. Before sunrise, he sat at the kitchen table with a black coffee and a notebook titled, Thanks, Ask. Under thanks, he wrote, Lily's giggle at the park. Veronica's call. The blue sky after court. Under ask, he wrote, Strength for the night shift. A job to replace the one we lost. Peace when I see Mark. He read aloud a verse Elena had suggested and let the words sit like a weight on his chest in the best way. John, chapter 14, verse 27. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. Let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid. Work changed too. He told his crews the truth and asked for their patience. 2 left, 4 stayed. He promoted a quiet man named Luis, who was better at spreadsheets than anyone knew. He hired an outside bookkeeper 1 day a week to close the books with clean hands. He said no to a job he couldn't do on time. and yes to 3 smaller jobs he could do with excellence. Reputation, like credit, recovers 1 bill at a time. The church gave him a ladder to hold. A widow on Maple Street needed a railing. He measured twice, cut once, and installed it straight as a hymn. A single mom needed a leaky sink tightened. He crawled under the cabinet in his good shirt and came out with a smile and a wet shoulder. On a Saturday, the men from Thursday rebuilt a rotten porch for a retiree with a laugh like a tambourine. Michael kept hammering after the others took a water break, not from penance, but from joy he hadn't expected. Seasons turned. Fall Sundays smelled like chili in the fellowship hall. Spring brought Lily's recital and the terror of sitting 3 rows behind Mark without flinching. Summer brought the cruel kindness of anniversaries. Time did not apologize for the speed at which it moved. Michael learned to keep up without hurrying. He learned to sleep again. On an ordinary Tuesday, 2 years in, he made the monthly payment and noticed the remaining balance begin with a 4. It had begun with a 1 and 5 zeros. He sat back and let himself smile without bargaining. He texted Veronica a picture of the screen. She replied with a gif of a tortoise wearing a medal. He laughed alone in the office and didn't feel alone. There were setbacks. A storm tore shingles from a school roof, and the insurance company delayed. He missed a meeting and felt the old heat in his chest. He drove straight to the church and sat on the cool tile and breathed. He had a dream where the app icon pulsed like a siren. He woke and put the phone in the freezer for 10 minutes because someone had said the cold breaks the loop. It did. One night, months later, Elena asked him to share at the Thursday circle. He stood with his hands open so they wouldn't clench. "I love the rush more than I loved my people," he said. "I served a master that took. Jesus didn't trade me. He bought me. I can't fix yesterday, but I can build today." He didn't quote a verse. He didn't need to. The men nodded like tides returning. A winter morning came when the number on his screen finally slid to 0. No trumpet sounded. A small green check mark blinked. He printed the page and pinned it to a corkboard above the coffee maker. He drove to Jared's and handed him another envelope. Not money this time, but a note. Paid. "Thank you. I'm here if you ever need a hand." Jared hugged him in a way men do when words would spoil the sturdiness of the moment. That Sunday, Michael stood by the church door and poured coffee for men who looked the way he had looked when he first came in. Hunted. He said the sentence that had saved him. "You will need help. We will help you." He meant it so deeply that it sounded like prayer. When Rachel and Mark married in a small ceremony under a maple, Michael stood with Lily at the back. He brought a gift, a set of tools in a tidy box, and a card that said only, "Peace to your home." He was not the hero of that day. He was a man who had learned that sometimes the holiest thing you can do is bless a table you will not sit at. He drove to the chapel after and sat where the light made stained rivers on the floor. "Now what?" he asked. Elena found him as if she'd been waiting in the hall for his question. "Now," she said, "you live as a man who is free. You work. You love your daughter. You serve. You keep a short account with God and with people, and when the old hunger knocks, you answer the door with friends." She smiled and added, Matthew, chapter 6, verse 33. "Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you." Not all the things you want, all the things you need. Michael nodded. The long road did not end in that chapel. It ran out the door and into an afternoon that smelled like rain. He stood, pocketed his keys, and went to look for someone who needed a railing, a ride, or a hand steady on the ladder. He started with the small mercies. Ramps and railings, groceries carried to a third-floor walk-up, late-night airport runs for a neighbor whose mother was sick in Dallas. One Saturday, the men from Thursday assembled at a veteran's bungalow to build a wheelchair ramp. The house smelled like old tobacco and new paint. Michael measured twice, cut once, and handed the impact driver to a kid who'd come with his dad. The boy grinned at the whir. The veteran rolled down the new ramp at dusk, palms on wheels, eyes wet. Michael waved it away like it was nothing and drove home with his windows down, air cool on his face, the rush he used to buy now arriving for free. The next test came dressed as fellowship. Super Bowl Sunday. A friend texted, "Squares at my place." Just for laughs, he brought chili and cornbread, set them on the counter, and felt his pulse spike when the poster board came out with blue marker lines and buy-in amounts in the margins. Laughter hopped from island to couch. The TV threw light on a room full of people he liked. The old stage inside him lit up, just a square or two. Ben caught his eye across the room and raised a brow. Michael shook his head and slipped onto the back porch. Cold night. Voices behind the glass. He called Ben's number and turned his face to the dark yard. "I'm on a porch," he said. "Squares on the table." Ben exhaled. "You already won, man. Call me back when the Gatorade pours." Michael laughed, shaky at first, then steadier. He put the phone in his pocket and breathed the way Elena had taught. 4 in, hold, 6 out. Whispering a verse he kept on a card in his wallet like a spare key. John, chapter 14, verse 27. "Peace I leave with you. Let not your hearts be troubled." He walked back in and started a cornhole game with the kids. When someone asked if he wanted to buy a square, he handed them a paper plate piled with chips and said, "I'm good. I'm on the chili team." The Gatorade poured orange. The room cheered. He washed dishes with his sleeves rolled and left with an empty crock pot and a quiet heart. Spring laid a soft hand on the city. One evening, at a small table outside a diner that served pancakes at all hours, Rachel passed him the new custody calendar. She wore happiness easily now, a light scarf and a ring that wasn't his. "Lily asked if you'd take her camping," she said. "She wants to see stars without streetlights." He swallowed gratitude like warmth. "Tell her yes," he said. "Tell her I already bought the marshmallows." They drove into a state park whose trees climbed the hills like a green crowd. At night, under a quilt of noise, crickets, a distant owl, the slap of water against rock. Lily asked the questions kids ask when the dark makes honesty feel safer. "Why did you leave?" He didn't say he hadn't. He didn't shift blame to a screen. "I got sick in my choices," he said. "I chose something that hurt our family. I'm sorry. I'm getting better with help." She nodded like a small judge who had decided the case would remain open but not hostile. They toasted marshmallows until one became a torch. They laughed until the dark seemed friendly. In the tent, he whispered a one-line prayer because simple words fit better in thin air. "God, keep us." He slept. Money kept moving like a glacier made of nickels. The debt management plan auto-drafted $3,180 on the 15th of every month. He wrote the number on a wall calendar and drew a green check every time it cleared. 48 boxes waited. He colored 22 of them and took a picture to send to Veronica, who replied, "That grid looks good on you." When interest and fees were finally counted, the ledger of his wreck would cost just over $150,000 to make right. He learned to stop hating the number. It was not a sentence. It was a set of stairs. He climbed. He kept his promise to Jared and added the 1,000 extra, then remembered the rubber band shoved back into his palm with the instruction. "Give 1,000 to somebody who needs it when you're strong enough." Strength didn't arrive with fanfare. It crept in like dawn. One night at the community center, a new guy named Hector admitted he was 2 weeks behind on rent with a 5-year-old asleep on an air mattress. "I don't need a miracle," Hector said. "I need a landlord who's patient." Michael went home, opened an envelope labeled "Give," and counted out 10 hundreds like he used to count out 10 20s for parlays. He printed a note. "No payback. Pass it on when you can," and slid the envelope under the community center office door with Hector's name. He didn't sign it. He slept like a man who had paid a small tax to joy. On a Wednesday that smelled like copy paper and old carpet, Elena asked if he'd speak to a health class at the high school about the new kind of gambling that fit in a pocket. He stood in front of 30 juniors whose eyes reflected fluorescent lights and phones under desks. He didn't preach. He told the truth. He held up his old phone with the apps gone and said, "They designed this to make my brain give them my money." He talked about how the first win felt like permission and the last loss felt like a command. He said, Mark, chapter 8, verse 36. "What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul?" He told them it had cost him a marriage and 3 Christmas mornings. He told them about the chili team on Super Bowl Sunday. A kid in the back raised a hand and asked if he missed the rush. "Sometimes," he said. "But I don't miss who I was when I chased it." After class, the teacher slid him a thank you card with coffee shop gift cards tucked inside. He dropped them in the Thursday group basket. "For newcomers," he said, "their first coffee shouldn't cost them courage." Every few months, he returned to the small booth with the lattice window. He didn't need anonymity anymore, but the wood felt like a trusted palm. After Rachel's wedding, he sat in the dim and asked the question that had hovered like a moth. "Is it right for me to date?" The voice on the other side answered with human care, not rules. "Grieve clean. Guard your daughter's peace. Don't recruit a nurse for your wound. If God gives you a companion, walk slowly and in the light." He wrote it down, because written counsel feels heavier in the hand. He did meet someone, not on an app, but at the church pantry, where flour and beans stacked like small mercies. Hannah was a nurse with shoe creases that said she stood more than she sat. She was not looking to rescue anyone. She laughed at the right places and didn't mind silence. When she asked about the ring mark that wasn't there, he told the truth without the gory details that turned confession into spectacle. She said, "Thank you for not making your pain my problem." They walked 3 times around the block after Thursday meeting for a month before they called it a date. They ate burgers, not candlelight, he told Ben afterward, who said, "Keep your eyes on the road and both hands on the wheel." He did. Year 3 brought anniversaries that tasted like metal and honey. 1,000 days without a bet. He got a chip that didn't sparkle. It just sat small and stubborn in his palm. The men clapped, then stacked chairs, because that's how most victories end. Applause and chores. He texted a picture of the chip to Veronica, who replied with a tortoise now wearing sunglasses. On a Monday morning, filled with invoices and the reliable hum of a coffee maker that had seen better filters, Luis knocked on the doorframe. "2 schools want summer work," he said. "We can do both if we hire 2 more." The old version of Michael would have said yes to all revenue. The rebuilt version measured twice. "1 school," he said. "Let's be the outfit that finishes early and clean." Luis grinned. Rock, not sand. One late afternoon, a storm rolled through town with the casual violence of summer. Sirens, then silence, then the smell of wet asphalt. Trees lay across a street like felled giants. In the lee of one, he saw a flash of a familiar jacket. Jared's. They cut the trunk together and dragged it to the curb. They didn't talk about the past. They talked about the weight of wood and the right angle for a cut. When the path was clear, Jared tapped the saw once like a salute. "Proud of you," he said. It landed like a benediction from a priest who swung a hammer instead of incense. There were still ambushes. A billboard on the highway with a smiling quarterback and the word "Insiders." An email that looked like a refund from a lost bet 3 years old. A coworker's bachelor party suggestion. Quick Vegas run. He practiced the sentences he'd need like fire drills. To the billboard, he said, "Not my master." To the email, he said nothing and clicked delete. To the bachelor party, he said, "I'll pay for brisket and I'll be at the lake by 9. Vegas can party without me." People respected clarity. Temptation respects a closed door more than a speech delivered through a cracked one. The day the last square on the calendar got its green check, he drove, almost without deciding, to the small chapel where light always seemed to be telling the truth. He sat in the pew and let silence rise in him until it felt like song. Elena slid into the row behind him as if rehearsed by kindness. He didn't need counsel. He needed company. She said nothing for a while, then, Luke, chapter 15, verse 24. "For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." He had heard the verse 100 times, but hearing it now felt like the world had finally pronounced his name correctly. As he stood to leave, a man hurried past him to the booth, eyes down, shoulders up around his ears, as if weather were falling only on him. Michael poured 2 coffees in the hallway and leaned against the wall. When the door opened, the man stepped out, blinking like someone who had left a cave. Michael held out a cup. "I'm Mike," he said. "They told me to tell the next guy. You will need help. We will help you." The man's laugh broke halfway to a sob. He took the cup like it was heavier than paper. "I lost a lot," he whispered. Michael nodded. "Me too," he said. "But I've learned how to build." They walked toward the fellowship hall, where folding chairs waited like open hands. The long road kept going, and Michael kept to it. One honest step, one steady day, one small mercy at a time. He took the newcomer, his name was Darius, by the elbow like a brother steering a brother through weather. Weeks turned into a pattern. Thursday circle, Tuesday pallets, Saturday service projects. Michael learned to listen for the particular shape of another man's storm. Darius's sounded like overtime slips and an ex who didn't answer texts. Hector's sounded like a coin jar emptied too fast. Ray's sounded like summer innings he couldn't watch. He didn't try to fix any of them. He kept coffee hot and chairs set, and when a verse was needed, really needed, he offered it like a rung, not a speech. At home, the house stayed modest on purpose. 1 bedroom for him, 1 for Lily. A kitchen that taught him how to season cast iron and stretch groceries. The calendar on the fridge traded red X's for green checks, as if breathing had a color. Every month, the automatic draft took 3,100 rudi, like a tide, and every month he let it go without bargaining. When he finally totaled the 4 years, fees, interest, everything ugly, he wrote the full sum on an index card and slid it into a Bible that had seen more fingerprints than his. $152,640. He dated the corner. He didn't hate the number anymore. It was proof that obedience could be counted. Trust came back in the smallest ways first. Rachel texted, "Can you take Lily to the dentist Thursday?" He replied with a picture of a waiting room fish tank and a thumbs up from a kid in a paper bib. She asked if he would do the science fair trifolds. He cut straight lines and helped glue stars. When Lily left a weekend sweater at his place, Rachel didn't ask for it back urgently, because she knew he would keep it clean and folded. Once, in a pinch, she called and asked if he could pick Lily up early because Mark was stuck on the interstate behind an 18-wheeler. "On my way," he said. And he was. He and Mark had their first real conversation in the doorframe at a middle school gym, the air thick with popcorn and whistles. "You want the Saturday?" Mark asked, offering a calendar square. Michael paused. "You two had plans?" Mark shrugged. "Yard work and pancakes. But she wants to learn your biscuit recipe." The joke broke the stiffness. They split the day. Pancakes in the morning at one house, biscuits in the afternoon at the other. Co-parenting wasn't friendship, not right away. It was a treaty written in small, faithful acts for the good of a girl who loved both of them. Michael could live with that. Hannah didn't arrive like a siren. She showed up like careful weather. She asked questions you only ask when you're not in a hurry. What does a good day look like to you? What makes you feel safe? He answered in present tense, not promises. They walked dogs for an old neighbor who pretended not to be watching from the parlor window. They stacked boxes at the pantry. When the town's summer festival Toss the Ring booth raised money for the marching band, she asked how he felt about it. "I'm okay with rings on milk bottles," he said. And they laughed in the way people laugh when they've both done hard math and come out with a number they can carry. Work taught him to bless the slow. He turned down a payday that smelled too fast. He proposed a new line for the company. Finish work. The unglamorous list of fixes after inspectors left. It paid less per hour than big installs, but it paid every hour. Luis built a spreadsheet that hummed. Crews finished early and sent pictures of clean rooms with the tape lines gone. Reputation didn't sprint back. It walked in and hung its coat. One August, the school board hired them to repair the auditorium after a leak. On a lunch break in the shadow of the stage, he found a flock of boys gambling with quarters behind the curtains. The leader's confidence looked familiar in a way that a mirror on a bad morning looks familiar. "Heads for dollars," the kid said, flipping shiny hope. Michael crouched so his voice could arrive from a friendly height. "Want to make 20? He asked. "Straight sweep, 15 minutes. Stack chairs. Sweep aisle to aisle, not circles. I'll pay." The kid smirked, but took the deal. When the brooms were still, Michael handed over the 20 and said, "I used to bet to feel like I mattered. Money earned feels better at midnight." He didn't add a verse. He didn't need to. Later that week, the same kid rolled a dolly loaded with paint without being asked. Holidays came with booby traps disguised as traditions. March Madness leafed the town in brackets. He kept his peace by picking something truer than avoidance. He became the church gym's unofficial scoreboard operator for the kids' league. He learned names, fouls, and how to say, "Nice pass," loud enough to drown the itch. When the men gathered in April to grill, he brought ribs and a standing rule. Any pool that involved money, he'd buy the lemonade for the table and sit the game out. People adjusted to his clarity the way you adjust to a no-nuts policy at a school. Out of love for the person who would pay the price. The Thursday circle grew. Some weeks a chair stayed empty for a man who was wrestling someplace else. Some weeks, 3 new faces sat with arms crossed until the coffee lowered their shoulders. Michael kept his sentences short and sharp. Secrecy is where this thing breathes. Delete before you debate. Make the call before the thought finishes forming. When he quoted scripture, he did it the way it had been given to him. Like a lifeline, not a library. Matthew chapter 7, verses 24 and 25, he'd say. And then, if the room felt ready for it, he'd quote it. "Everyone who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock." Sometimes men closed their eyes and mouthed the last line with him. Sometimes no one did. It still worked. In year 4, Lily turned 13. They planned the party like a small diplomatic summit. Mark handled the grill. Rachel managed playlists. Michael did games. At dusk, he wheeled out a telescope wrapped in a thrift store quilt. Lily clapped both hands over her mouth. "Stars without street lights," she said, remembering the camping trip. They set it up in the backyard, neighbors leaning over fences the way neighbors do when curiosity tastes like cake. Lily found Saturn's ring and whispered a small "wow," so pure it felt like prayer. Later, when the last paper plate had surrendered, Mark leaned close. "You gave her a sky," he said. Michael swallowed and said, "She gave me a map." Once a month, he still sat in the little booth with the lattice window, not because wreckage waited, though wreckage always waits, but because peace requires maintenance. "I'm not white-knuckling anymore," he told the voice one evening, "but sometimes I miss the version of me that thought he was invincible." The answer came gentle and right. That wasn't invincibility, that was anesthesia. Luke chapter 9, verse 23. Take up your cross daily. Daily means the dose of grace matches the day. He wrote it down on the card in his wallet. Hannah met Lily slowly, like someone entering a room with a sleeping cat. They made granola bars for the pantry and argued about the right ratio of chocolate chips to oats. When Hannah asked if she could come to the recital, Lily shrugged in the universal language of teenage permission. After, Hannah handed Lily flowers from a grocery store that wrapped them like they were more expensive than they were. "You were brave," she said. It was the right compliment. They kept walking slowly because slowness is how trust learns your name. Then came a summer relay of disasters. 3 roofs in a row underbid by a competitor who cut corners, a compressor failure, and a sprained wrist on a Tuesday that already needed mercy. The old thought slid in with the familiarity of a song from high school. You could fix this in 1 weekend if you just placed a heater. He didn't wrestle it alone. He texted Ben the single word they used for storms. Weather. Ben called. Michael let the thought out loud where light could touch it. "I want to go fast," he admitted. "Then go small," Ben said. "Call a brother. Ask a client for an extension with honesty. Take a job you can finish. Eat something that isn't courage candy." He ate a grilled cheese and called the client and said the sentence he had learned to trust. "I can do it if you can give me until Friday. I refuse to promise what I can't deliver." The client said yes. Friday came, and the work was finished early and clean. On a clear fall evening, Elena asked if he'd consider helping launch a builder's circle for men and women starting over. Work, budgets, boundaries, prayer. "Not a program," she said. "A table." He didn't feel qualified and said so. She smiled. Tables don't need heroes. They need hosts. He put his name down and wrote 2 words beneath it. Make coffee. One last reckoning remained, and it came not in numbers, but in a question asked at a picnic table behind the church, where pine needles tried and failed to be a tablecloth. Rachel lifted her eyes to his in a way that told him she trusted the ground under them both. "Do you forgive me?" she asked, a lightning bolt of humility because she didn't have to ask. He blinked, surprised by the shape of her courage. "For what?" she breathed out. "For leaving when I did. For choosing peace without waiting to see if you found it." He thought of the kitchen table with ink-smudged papers, the suitcase with Lily's sweater, the courthouse hallway with blue sky afterward. "Yes," he said, and his yes was so clean it startled him. "Do you forgive me?" She nodded. They sat there like 2 people signing documents you can't file anywhere but heaven. He walked home under a sky freckled with early stars, the city humming softly. He passed a billboard he'd stopped noticing, a quarterback's smile promising insiders a shortcut to the feeling he'd once bought. He didn't curse it or preach at it. He just lifted his hand in a kind of half salute to the boy he used to be and kept walking. A man with 2 hands on the wheel, a daughter to call, a circle to host, a job in the morning, and a peace that did not need odds to be real. The first builder's circle met on a Tuesday night when the air felt like clean paper. They pushed 2 folding tables together and let the edges show. Earl came with knuckles like old hinges and a welder's squint. Tasha came in scrubs, hair pulled tight, a grocery list folded into a square in her pocket. Hector came in a shirt that had belonged to a better week. Darius came with hands hungry to fidget and a jaw that chewed ghosts. Elena opened in the simplest way possible, by thanking God for chairs and light and the chance to try again. Michael poured coffee and set out index cards and a pen in front of each seat like tools on a bench. They started with names and one true sentence. Earl said, "I sold my tools during the dark and I want them back." Tasha said, "I'm paying off a car I can't drive because it's in a tow yard." Hector said, "I need a landlord to believe me one more time." Darius said, "I don't know how to make a quiet room in my head." Michael said, "I know where to find lumber and ladders, and I know how to sit when the room gets loud inside." It wasn't a manifesto. It was a floor plan. They made a rule that no one would leave without one small, measurable thing to do before Friday. A phone call, a budget line moved, a conversation rehearsed, an envelope labeled. They wrote them on the index cards. Earl would visit the pawn shop and ask the price on the TIG machine with the dented case. Tasha would call the tow yard and ask for a payment plan without letting shame do the talking. Hector would take the envelope Michael slid across the table and put it under his landlord's door with a note that said, "Thank you for patience. Here is proof." Darius would ask his boss for Saturday overtime and text Ben a photo of the schedule. They stacked the cards in a neat pile, as if agreements could be made heavy by order alone. 2 weeks later, Darius missed a Thursday. The circle left a chair empty. On Friday, a number Michael didn't recognize lit the phone. A bartender's voice said a man had given his name and this number, then put his head down on an outdoor table behind the off-track lounge. Michael drove with the windows open because the wind kept him honest. He found Darius in an island of light thrown by a weak lamp, knuckles blue with cold, the cardboard wristband still on. Michael didn't preach. He put his jacket over Darius's shoulders and dialed Ben. The rule was no rescues alone. They sat on the curb like boys who had missed the last bus. Darius said, "I thought I could stop it a little." Michael said, "Little isn't a unit for this." Ben arrived with 2 waters and a silence that had carried many men. They drove Darius to a detox intake where fluorescent lights refused to flatter anyone. At a plastic desk, he signed his name with a hand that trembled. Michael pressed a palm to the form so the page wouldn't slide. When Darius asked, "Will you be there when I come out?" Michael said, "Thursday, 7 o'clock. Coffee will be hot." It wasn't a promise to hold up the sky, only a pledge to stand under it beside him. Saturday morning, the builders' circle gathered at a widow's house where the back steps listed like a tired man. Earl measured and mumbled the way craftsmen do when math is a language. Tasha leveled the posts with a nurse's decisiveness. Hector brought 3 kinds of screws, proof that Grace had started stocking his life with choices. Michael cut stringers and showed a teenager how to hold a saw so it wouldn't learn his blood. They ate sandwiches sitting on the tailgates, wood dust gold on forearms. The new steps held on the first try. The widow tested them with small, brave feet and said, "Solid as a hymn." Earl took his cap off, a liturgy no one had taught him. Debt finished dying in spring. Michael didn't throw a party. He honored a rhythm. He drove to the small chapel and laid the last payment receipt under the cross, as if paper could bow. Elena sat one pew behind. They didn't need a ceremony. She whispered a verse, like a signature on a page that had waited years for ink. Psalm, chapter 1, verse 3. He is like a tree planted by streams of water. Its leaf does not wither. In all that he does, he prospers. He did not hear a guarantee of money. He heard a promise about roots. He walked out under a sky that seemed to have been cleaned during the service. Work found a steady gait. The company's new slogan, "Finish Well," showed up on invoices and in how crews swept corners. Luis trained a kid named Miles in spreadsheets and tape measures. The school district renewed their contract. Jared sent 3 referrals with notes that said, "He shows up. Jesta." Michael said no to 2 jobs that were priced like traps, and yes to one that would keep 5 men employed through a winter that liked to bully. He kept blessing what he could not keep. When tax refunds landed and everyone's grip loosened, he took Lily to buy shoes for a girl from her class who'd come to school in flip-flops in February. Lily handled the box like liturgy. "She likes purple," she said. And they picked the pair with laces that looked like small, joyful ropes. In the car, Lily asked the question she'd been saving. "Would you ever get married again?" He didn't rush the answer. "If God wrote it, and if you and I and everybody had peace," he said. She nodded, satisfied by a sentence that didn't make a promise it couldn't keep. Hannah held her pace. She didn't turn into a plan or a prize. She remained a person. On a Sunday afternoon, they volunteered at the pantry. Shelves neat as a choir. Labels facing forward. A man came in jittering with a hurry that wasn't hunger. His eyes snagged on a scratch-off ticket display in a convenience store across the street, and then returned as if yanked by a string. Michael watched the tug pull a human being back and forth and felt grief without condemnation. On the walk to the car, Hannah slipped her hand through his arm. "How's your weather?" she asked. "Clear," he said, "but I brought a coat." She laughed, which was all he'd wanted. Summer drew a clean line at the river where the town threw its festival. The toss-a-ring booth clanged. The carousel played a song that refused to be sophisticated. Cotton candy glued blue to children's cheeks. Michael carried a toolbox for the booth volunteers because one of the milk bottles wobbled. He tightened a bolt and stepped back as a kid landed a ring and jumped 2 feet in the air without asking permission from physics. Across the midway, an LED board flashed odds for a different tent, legal and smiling. Michael turned his shoulder to it like a sailor to wine he didn't need. He bought lemonade and asked Lily about the constellations they'd seen last fall. She drew the Big Dipper and condensation on the cup. On a Thursday that should have been ordinary, Darius walked in late, eyes clear and emptied. He sat, fidgeted once, and then surprised the circle with the same sentence Michael had once carried like a torch. "I am going to live in the light now." He set a chip on the table, the color of first mornings. No one clapped. They stacked chairs slower than usual, stretching out the moment like good bread. A letter came from the credit counseling office addressed to client completed. It contained nothing a frame deserved, just numbers and a line that said, "Program successfully fulfilled." Michael slid it behind the corkboard above the coffee maker where spilled grounds had left honest stains. He pinned next to it a new sheet, a list titled Give, Names and Needs, each with a date and a small box to color green. Earl's Taige Machine Fund, Tasha's Tires, a scholarship for the kid who stacked chairs like a pro and swept the aisle to aisle. Autumn returned, and with it, the school's request for another auditorium repair. Behind the curtain, no coins fell this time. The boys moved chairs without bets, muscle memory retrained by dignity. Michael watched them and felt something that used to be hunger settle into something that looked a lot like peace. On a fresh Sunday, Elena asked if he would read scripture before the sermon. He walked to the front with a page that had been practiced, not performed. Matthew, chapter 11, verses 28 through 30. His voice didn't thunder. It held. "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light." He sat down, not as a man making announcements, but as a man who had worn the words until they fit like a shirt. He didn't know if he would ever wear a ring again. He didn't know if another storm would find him when he was tired and hungry and alone. He knew only what he had learned one quiet day at a time, that houses on rock feel like mercy in a hard rain, that small, faithful things grow into shelter, that some debts are paid in dollars and some in hours with a hammer or a listening ear, and that grace is not a jackpot, but a job that begins every morning with air and ends every night with peace. And he knew what to tell the next man who stumbled through the door with a phone hot in his pocket and a number in his head. He would hand him coffee and an index card and say, with the calm of a man who had buried his gods and kept his friends, "You will need help. We will help you." Late winter laid frost along the eaves and left the mornings bright and brittle. On one of those blue cold days, a white envelope with a window arrived at the shop. The return address was a sports book he hadn't seen in years, the logo redesigned as if a new font could make old hooks kind. "We miss you," the letter began. "A welcome back bonus stacked like bait. Expiration dates pretending to be urgency." He did not tear it up right away. He walked it to the break room, laid it on the corkboard beside the green-checked calendar and the credit counselor's old tortoise printout, and called Elena from the landline that never buzzed with apps. She answered on the second ring. He read the first paragraph. She sighed the way pastors sigh when wolves put on lamb's linen. "You know what to do," she said. He nodded and did it by the book. He sent a certified letter demanding removal from all lists. He forwarded a copy to the state self-exclusion office. He tucked a photocopy into the weather folder he kept for days when he needed to remember that wisdom is a habit, not a mood. He punched a thumbtack through the offer and left it on the board, not as a trophy, but as a warning. Men poured coffee and saw it and shook their heads like people standing at the edge of a cliff with a good guardrail. The builder's circle grew into a small economy of mercy. They started a tool library on 2 metal shelves in a spare closet at church. Saws with tape on the handles, a set of sockets, a nail gun with a note that read, "Check out, check in, treat like a friend." Earl came back from the pawn shop with the dented Tige welder and the grin of a man who had bought back a language. He set it on a dolly like a captured flag and wrote his name on masking tape. "For borrowing on Saturdays," he said, then added, "and for teaching, if you want to learn." 3 teenagers showed up the next week. Tasha called the tow yard and found a manager whose voice was tired but fair. A payment plan was possible with proof and patience. The circle printed a flyer and held a tow yard amnesty day at the church, where Elena stood beside folding tables as though the kingdom were always going to look like paperwork and prayer. People brought contracts and shame curled into envelopes. They left with dates and numbers and handshakes. Tasha's car came home. She parked it in the far corner of the lot and took a picture that looked like dignity. Hector slipped his rent under the landlord's door with the note Michael had typed for him. Patience arrived in a reply written on a grocery list. "Okay, keep coming by with your plan." Hector began showing up with his plan the way some men show up for a bar stool. The landlord stopped by the builder's circle one Thursday to see what kind of machine could turn panic into schedules. He left with an index card that said, "One small, measurable thing before Friday." He was not a religious man, but he understood lists. Darius completed detox and walked into the circle on a night when the rain learned to fall sideways. He sat down without talking and let the drip of his coat do the speaking for a while. When it was his turn, he kept it simple. "I've got 30 days and a job washing dishes and a roommate who snores." Michael slid him a pen. Darius wrote, "Call the court to set a date. Ask my sister if I can see my nephew. Walk around the block after my shift instead of past the lounge." He put the card in his breast pocket like a badge. At the shop, Luis pitched an idea for winter work. A maintenance package for small churches and aging community centers. Filters changed, furnaces checked, leaks caught before they became sermons. Michael said yes to what was small and true. They wrote the service list in plain English and printed it on thick paper that felt like commitment. The first client was a storefront church with 20 chairs and a choir that sounded like 50. The furnace growled. The roof sighed. They tightened and patched and vacuumed and left an invoice the pastor could pay without selling his guitar. Finish. Welded. And the pastor said the sentence that had become a currency in Michael's life. He shows up. He and Hannah kept their cadence. Once a month, they drove to the state line to hike a trail that asked nothing of them but breath. They talked about the kind of people they wanted to be 5 years from now, and which casseroles actually deserved to be at funerals. He told her he still checked the angles of his days, like a man who'd once been robbed by his own hands. She told him she honored the caution because it kept rooms safe. In the parking lot after a hike, he asked if he could pray for them in the way he knew how. Short and honest. "Jesus, keep us true and slow," he said, and that was enough. Lily learned parallel parking and patience. The first time she backed between cones that stood like smug judges, she clipped one and swore under her breath, then apologized to the cone as if it could hear. He grinned and kept his hands on his knees. When she passed the test with the DMV examiner staring stone still at her hands, Michael stood by the counter with his wallet ready and tears he refused to embarrass her with. They celebrated at a diner with pancakes at all hours. On the way out, she stopped beside the photo booth, fished quarters from the change dish, and looked at him. "Just pictures?" she said. They made two faces, their serious face and their dumb face, and the machine spat out 4 rectangles that would curl slightly at the edges and stay in his wallet like proof that time can learn to be kind. The last hard test carried a smile. A contractor they'd helped in the storm sent a thank you check with more zeros than Michael sometimes trusted. It would have paid for a crew bonus and the tool library and the pantry shelves and a very good grill. The checks that feel like windfalls can sound like old music. He did not decide alone. He took the paper to Elena and Luis and the circle. On the whiteboard, they wrote options without adjectives. Save, give, invest in a second crew, hire Miles full-time, replace the compressor, fund rent for a vet who'd slept in his truck, pay off a remaining medical bill that had limped behind the bigger debts. They prayed the way they always prayed. Not fancy, but specific. God, make us wise. Then they did the most boring and beautiful thing a group can do. They split the check into pieces that looked like love. Miles got a job. The compressor got replaced. The pantry got beans. The vet got 3 months' rent and a locksmith who changed the narrative on his door. The tool library got a second dolly. Finish well did. On a cool Saturday, the circle gathered at the river to build a small footbridge on a trail that washed out every spring. The county had permits and gratitude. The church had hands and sandwiches. Earl taught welding to a kid named Isaiah, who'd never held a helmet and looked like salvation in a borrowed jacket. Tasha ran a chalk line with the crisp competence of somebody who knew how to start IVs and settle arguments. Darius set the rebar and admitted, quiet and marveling, that he could feel his mind like a room with fewer voices in it. The bridge rose by inches. Hikers stopped and thanked them and moved on. It rained twice, and they kept going. At dusk, when the last board was set and the last screw snug, they walked across in single file like first graders on a field trip, grown adults laughing at the miracle of a simple span doing its job. That night, Michael drove Lily home, the windows down and the dashboard throwing soft light. She had a splinter he dug out with a needle and a joke she'd told 3 times because each delivery got better. At the curb, she didn't unbuckle right away. "Dad?" she asked. "Yeah? Do you ever wish things had gone differently?" He watched twilight stack on the house fronts and answered with the care of a man who had used words like nails. "I wish I had not hurt you and Mom. I wish I had chosen sooner. But wishing backward is a poor carpenter. What I have is you, and this night, and a bridge I got to build with my friends, and peace. That's a lot." She nodded and kissed his cheek in the quick, embarrassed way of a girl deciding whether to be a child or a woman one moment at a time. "See you Wednesday," she said. Bring the telescope," he called, and she gave him a thumbs up out the window. Months later, fewer storms, more chores. Elena asked him if he would speak one Sunday evening at a service meant for people who slipped in the back and left when the first Amen gave them cover. "Not a sermon," she said. "A life told true." He stood at the front where bass strings hummed softly in the soundboard and told the story without embroidery. A borrowed van, a pink snow cone in a frame, a first bet disguised as a joke, an app under a pillow, 3 cards and a personal loan, a kitchen table with a stack of numbers, a suitcase with a sweater on top, a booth with a lattice window, a voice saying, "You are not your worst decision," a tortoise gif, 48 green boxes, 1,000 small yeses, a sentence learned by heart. "You will need help. We will help you." He finished with a verse that had walked him out of the far country and into a good day's work. Matthew chapter 6, verse 33. He said, slow, steady, "Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you." He did not name which things. He let the room guess from the evidence. A steady heart, a daughter who stargazed and told jokes, a crew that finished jobs early and clean, a circle that set out index cards and coffee and hope, a bridge that held in the spring flood. He stepped down and joined the people heading for the door because he was one of them. Just a man who had put his hands to the right work and found that peace does not gamble. It grows. He didn't make it to the door before a man in a windbreaker stopped him, fingers worrying a ball cap brim. "Name's Nate," the man said, eyes flicking to the exit like a bird to a hedge. "My wife says it's out of hand. I say I'm fine." Michael tilted his head, the way you do when you're listening for a deeper sound beneath the words. He reached in his back pocket and offered an index card. "One small, measurable thing before Friday," he said. "Delete the apps. Tell one truth to one person who can actually help you. Then come Thursday, 7 o'clock. Nate stared at the card like it had a temperature. "What if I lose the game?" Michael smiled, not unkind. "Brother, the game has been losing you. Let's change who wins." The week folded itself into familiar shapes. Invoices. A porch step that split under winter. Lily's text about a physics project that needed cardboard and ambition. A nurse on the phone about a pantry client whose lights were getting cut. Hannah at the end of a long shift, her voice a quiet place to sit. He kept the habits that had rebuilt him. Coffee with the card that said thanks, ask, an envelope marked give, a call to Ben when weather gathered. The Thursday circle with chairs set 2 hours early because hope likes a head start. Nate showed up. He didn't say much. He sat with his hat in his lap and watched men tell the truth without falling apart. Ben opened with the ground rules. Elena hovered like a lamppost. Deacon Paul closed with the verse that had become the room's heartbeat. Matthew chapter 5, verse 6. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Nate didn't speak, but he put his phone in the basket when it came around. When the circle ended, he stood a little taller, as if the room had oxygen he hadn't breathed in a while. Work offered a parable you could walk on. A landlord called about an old duplex where the front porch slouched and the sill plate had rotted to memory. It's not pretty under there, the man warned. Michael crawled on his belly with a headlamp and saw a story he knew too well. Beautiful paint on broken bones. He slid out dusty and grinning. We'll go to dirt, he told Luis. Jack it, sister it, pour new footers, and set it right. For 2 days, they sweated under the house, shovels ringing, bottle jacks creaking, new concrete turning from cream to stone. When the jacks finally took weight, the porch rose a quiet inch. Inside, the doors that had stuck for 10 years closed with 2 fingers. The tenants cheered like a small stadium. Michael brushed mud from his forearms and thought, houses fall onto what they lean on. So do men. On Saturday, he and Lily cut cardboard into planes and parabolic ramps on the kitchen floor. Tape clung to socks. Flour dust from biscuits drifted into glue. We're modeling gravity, she said, with the gravity of a scientist who had learned the word model meant make a mess until the world teaches you a rule. When the plane finally slid true, she whooped and threw both arms up. He took a picture he didn't post anywhere, just kept. Because some proofs are for the inside of wallets, Rachel texted. Mark's dad needed a grab bar in the shower. Could he install one? Small, specific, a treaty written in useful acts. He brought a stud finder, a level, and a drill. Said hello, listened to a story about a minor league season in '79, and set the bar plumb. On the way out, Mark's dad shook his hand with the lingering grip of men who learned courtesy when it still came with hats. Your girl talks about stars, he said. Keep a telescope in the car, Michael replied, touching the trunk like a badge. They laughed, allies by way of a single orbiting teenager. At the pantry, Hannah handed him a clipboard and a look. We're low on diapers and beans, she said. I can get beans, he said. You always do, she answered, scribbling. He liked the world better when sentences were that simple. On the walk to the truck, he told her about the porch and the jack and the inch of rise. She listened like a carpenter. Eyes on structure, nods at the right load-bearing words. That sound the wood makes when it finally seats, she said. Favorite sound, he said. Second favorite, she countered, tapping her foot to an unheard choir. Spring pried up winter's edges. The river ran higher. The bridge they'd built held. Darius picked up a weekend shift that wasn't a bar and learned the trick of eating before a late night so hunger didn't sell him out. Tasha's car made a new noise. The circle found a mechanic who treated her like a customer instead of a confession. Earl showed up one Thursday with a lunchbox instead of a toolbox and 2 apprentices with haircuts that tried to be tougher than their hope. Helmet up, he told them. We're welding dignity today. And then, because life keeps its own calendar, a text from Rachel. ER visit. Appendicitis. We're okay. Can you get Lily? He was already in the truck when the second message arrived, with a picture of a thumbs up from a hospital bed. He picked Lily up with a blanket in the passenger seat and a bag of snacks that tried too hard, and he sat with her in a waiting room built of linoleum and older magazines. "Scary," she said. "Yep," he said. They played a game where they guessed the lives of people by their shoes. A nurse with sensible clogs walked like someone who'd been sprinting between rooms since 6 a.m. A young man in paint-splattered work boots bounced a knee, the rhythm of worry. An older woman in polished flats stood like she was practicing not to cry. "She's waiting for good news," Lily said. "So are we," he said. They prayed in the plain style that had taught his days to hold. "Jesus, keep them," he said. Lily added, "and help the surgeon not be shaky." He smiled into the fluorescent hum. Late that night, after the all-clear and a soft-voiced discharge, he got Lily home with a promise of pancakes in the morning and a plan to be at the hospital at 7 with coffee for Mark and a phone charger for Rachel. On his own porch, he paused. The house didn't creak. The air held steady. He whispered the verse that had become muscle. Matthew, chapter 11, verses 28 through 30. He said softly to the dark, "Come to me, and I will give you rest." He did not quote the rest aloud. He lived it. The next Thursday, Nate put both hands on the basket and didn't flinch when his phone left his palm. He spoke his first full paragraph. "I told my brother," he said. "He didn't make a speech. He texted me every day at lunch. 'Eat,' he says. 'Call me at 5. We do this out loud.'" The circle nodded like a congregation that has found its hymn. Deacon Paul closed them with the old anchor. "Matthew chapter 7, verses 24 and 25, he said. "And the room. Men with dirt under nails, women in scrubs, a foreman with a softened jaw. Finished it together. Not as performance, but as muscle memory." A week later, the county inspector walked the river footbridge after a hard rain and left a note tucked in the brace. Held. Michael found it and slid it into his wallet beside the photo booth strip, where he and Lily made their serious and dumb faces. He looked at both pieces of paper and laughed, because sometimes the universe pairs its metaphors too obviously to ignore. On a warm evening, with the smell of cut grass rising like gratitude, he set 3 lawn chairs in his tiny backyard. One for him, one for Lily, one left empty on purpose. He pointed the telescope and found the moon startled and close. Lily leaned and gasped the small gasp he would chase forever. "Dad," she said, "look at the craters." He looked. He thought of the first bet, the printed papers on a kitchen table, the booth with the lattice window, the sentence that had rescued him. "You will need help. We will help you." And he let the quiet lay like a blanket. Across the fence, a neighbor yelled toward a screen about a game whose score meant something tonight and not at all tomorrow. Michael felt the familiar flicker and watched it pass like a moth that could not find a porch light. Hannah stepped through the gate with a bag of grocery store flowers that were better than they cost and a plate wrapped in foil. "Peach cobbler," she said. "Practice for a funeral nobody's having." He set the plate down and moved the empty chair to make room. She sat. Lily adjusted the telescope and gave a running commentary on Mare and Highlands like a junior tour guide to the heavens. When it grew late, he walked Hannah to her car under a sky written with patient fire. "What does a good day look like to you?" she'd asked him once. He answered again now, because some questions deserve many answers. A steady morning. A job finished early and clean. Coffee that doesn't lie. Someone to help. A chair left empty on purpose for whoever needs it. And you, walking through the gate with Cobbler. She squeezed his hand and didn't try to gild it. He slept the sleep of men who have put their hands to true work and told the truth to people who can hold it. In the morning, he would make coffee, pray the short prayer, color a small box on a sheet tacked to a corkboard with coffee stains, and set out index cards that said one small, measurable thing before Friday. He would check on Darius, text Ben, weather clear, send Veronica a picture of a spreadsheet that now began with zeros, teach Isaiah how to sand with the grain, and answer a call from someone who had found his number on a bulletin board, next to a white envelope with a logo redesigned to look like kindness. And when a man stepped through the door with Storm in his pockets, he would offer him a chair and a cup and a sentence that had become his life's refrain, spoken not like a slogan, but like a promise kept in 1,000 ordinary ways. You will need help. We will help you. Spring settled into the seams of the town, softening hard edges without asking anyone's permission. The river kept its promise. The bridge held. Finish. Well kept showing up. On a Tuesday, Elena found Michael on the fellowship hall ladder, replacing a bulb that hummed like an old hymn, and said, "The county chaplain called. Jail needs someone to talk straight about pocket gambling. You're good at straight." He went the next week with a stack of index cards and no illusions. The room smelled like disinfectant and endings. 8 men in orange sat with their arms either folded against the room or open toward it. He couldn't tell which. He told the truth without embroidery. The app under the pillow, the number on the kitchen table, the envelope that wasn't enough, the booth with the lattice window. He gave them the sentence he had learned to trust. You will need help. We will help you. A young man with a fresh scar on his cheek asked if the itch ever left. Not always, Michael said, but it gets quieter when you tell on it. When a guard tapped his watch, Michael ended the only way he knew how. Matthew chapter 6, verse 33. Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. He didn't finish out loud. He let the room decide what these things might be when the gates opened. Back in town, ordinary life kept its holy rhythm. Filters changed, budgets balanced, kids coached, beans stacked. He and Lily drove to the park with the telescope in the trunk, in the habit of looking up. After Saturn, after the craters, after a meteor nobody else believed they'd seen. She asked it sideways. Do you love Hannah? He had rehearsed a dozen grown-up answers and didn't use any of them. Yes, he said. Do you? She squinted at the moon like it might help. I like how she listens, she said, and how her scrubs always smell like soap. He laughed into the dark. Me too. He went back to the little booth with the lattice window, because decisions felt safer in rooms that reminded him he was not his own compass. How do I know if it's time? He asked the voice on the other side. The answer came without pressure and with weight. Ask the right people the right questions. Rachel, for Lily's sake. Ben, because he tells you the truth. Elena, because she'll bless or wait. And ask God out loud. James, chapter 1, verse 5. If anyone lacks wisdom, let him ask. And he did the list like it was a work order. Rachel and he walked 2 laps around the block in a dusk that smelled like sprinkler mist. I'm not asking permission, he said. I'm asking for peace. She nodded. You have it, she said. She's steadier when you're steady. Ben listened with a mechanic's ear and said, check your bolts. Are you marrying to be whole or because you are? Elena asked him if he could do today without Hannah and still be faithful. Yes, he said, surprised to hear the honesty before he planned it. Then you can ask without making her your savior. He wrote the answers on an index card and tucked it with the thanks, ask notebook. He waited a month on purpose. He watched for weather. None arrived. On a Saturday not chosen for significance, He and Hannah drove to a trail where the trees made a green tunnel, and the creek spoke in a voice older than their mistakes. At a bend where someone had stacked stones into a small altar, he stopped and reached into his pocket. The ring was simple, a band that looked like it wanted to work. "I can't promise easy," he said, "but I can promise honest. Will you walk slow with me?" Hannah smiled the smile of a woman who counted words as carefully as she did pills on a med cart. "Yes," she said. "Slow is my favorite speed." They told Lily first. She cried, which is how big changes visit teenagers who love you. Tears for what was and what will be. One hand on your shoulder and one on the future. Rachel dropped off a bundt cake and a blessing. Mark shook Michael's hand in the front yard, where the telescope had shown them the rings of a planet, and said, "We're for you." Ben brought a toolbox out of habit, then laughed when he realized they didn't need it. Elena prayed a quiet prayer in the chapel with the colored light. Nothing elaborate, just gratitude and a request. "Keep them true and slow," she said, like an echo from the trail. The wedding was a Tuesday evening because that's when the fellowship hall calendar had a square without a potluck or a basketball practice. The flowers were from a grocery store that wrapped them like they were more expensive than they were. Lily read the anchor verse that had fitted itself to their days. Matthew, chapter 11, verses 28 through 30. She said, steady as a good hand on a saw. "Come to me, and I will give you rest." Ben cried with the dignity of a man who still carried wrenches in his truck. Darius set out chairs with the careful pride of someone who had practiced living. Tasha taped "no nuts" on the cookie table because love remembers details. Earl welded the word "welcome" into a little arch that the kids ran under like it was a game invented for them. After, in the fellowship hall lit by strings of borrowed bulbs, Hannah's nurse friends and Michael's crews and half the Thursday circle ate barbecue off paper plates and told the kind of stories you only tell when nobody in the room is trying to be impressive. Someone asked what their song was. Hannah shrugged. Probably a hymn and a tire shop jingle. They laughed and danced anyway, badly and on purpose. Work did not pause for holy days. The next morning, Michael met Luis at the school where a storm had torn fascia like paper. Miles brought coffee with the wrong order and the right grin. They measured, cut, and set the run. The tin ringing like a bell when screws seated. Michael drove to the shop for lunch and found the mail again. A white envelope with a window from a different house dressed in the same fake kindness. He smiled at the predictability, slid it into the weather folder without reading it, and sent a picture of the closed drawer to the Thursday group. Ben replied with the tortoise and sunglasses. Darius replied with a thumbs up over a sink full of dishes. Elena replied with one line. Rock, not sand. The builder's circle kept being a table, not a program. They added a second night for women who wanted accountability without having to explain the weather to men. Tasha led, index cards and a pen in front of each seat like tools. A single mom named Mia wrote, "Call the bank. Ask about a secured card. Put $20 in tires." They cheered small numbers as if they were high notes, because they were. Holidays came around again, bringing lights and temptations with equal wattage. Michael kept doing the boring, beautiful things that make rooms safe. Budget meetings, early finishes. A pocket verse said under his breath in the plumbing aisle. John, chapter 14, verse 27. He'd whisper, feeling the words seat like a joist on a new footer. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. One winter afternoon, he returned to the jail to find Nate in orange at the back of the room, capless, eyes level. It knocked the wind out of him for a heartbeat. After the talk, they spoke through the quiet. "I'm not the hero of my family right now," Nate said. "You don't have to be." Michael answered. Just be the man who makes one right call before Friday. Nate nodded, jaw working. Delete or detox? He asked. Yes, Michael said, and they both smiled at the clarity. In the spring thaw, the river rose higher than anyone liked. The bridge held again, water eating at the banks and then sulking back. Michael walked across it at dusk, hand in Hannah's, Lily up ahead with a friend, their laughter like flags. He ran his palm along the rail and felt the screws, each one a choice that had not looked heroic on the day it was turned. He went back to the small booth with the lattice window one more time. Not because a crisis had arrived, but because gratitude needs a place to sit. Thank you, he said into the wood. For telling me I wasn't my worst decision. For teaching me to go small. For the verse that fits a lunch break. For the people who hold the other end of the board. The voice on the other side said only, keep building. He stood, and when he stepped into the hall, a man with weather in his pockets almost ran into him. Michael steadied him by the elbow and smiled. Coffee, he said. We've got a table. The man nodded, dazed by kindness, and followed the smell of beans and the sound of chairs scraping against a floor where so many storms had already drained away. Summer wrote its name in chalk down Main Street. Sidewalk art, lemonade stands, the smell of sun-baked tar. Finish. Well took on a school gym repaint, a job big enough to feed the crews and small enough to finish clean. The principal walked them through under buzzing lights and stopped beneath a scoreboard that coughed to life in a flicker. We're replacing it, she said. A company offered a donation if we'll put their banner under the clock. The mock-up showed smiling helmets and a line of tiny print that meant legal trouble disguised as fun. Michael felt the old shiver pass through him like a train in the distance. He kept his voice even. Who's the sponsor? She said the name like it might be neutral. It wasn't. He took a breath and asked for a day. In the office, he closed the door and laid the flyer on the desk between him and Luis. We can't hang that, he said. Luis nodded like a plumb line. Nope. He went to the chapel, because wood and silence tell the truth. What do I do? He asked the lattice. The voice on the other side gave him both scripture and sense. Matthew chapter 5, verse 13, the voice said, You are the salt of the earth. Salt preserves. Don't let rot look like revenue. Then counsel plain as a grocery list. Bring a better plan. Don't just say no. Build a yes. That night, he texted the circle. Need ideas. No gambling banners. What can a gym wear? Replies stacked like studs. Earl. Welding contest fundraiser. Student-built racks auctioned to parents. Tasha. Clinic night. Nurses teach CPR. $10 a head. Proceeds to scoreboard. Hector. Taco night with the food truck cousin. Darius. Dishwashing marathon. He'd wash if someone else cooked. Ben. Old car show. $50 to enter. Kids vote with quarters and jars. Elena. And a choir concert. Love sings better than slogans. They pitched it to the principal under the hum of the old board. She blinked at the list and laughed like someone who had expected a polite refusal and received a parade permit. You think you can pull this off? We don't know, Michael said. But we know how to stack chairs and show up. She picked up a pen and circled choir night with a flourish. The next 4 Saturdays looked like a small town reminded of its capacity. Students in safety glasses welded squats racks while Earl moved through them like a foreman grandfather. Nurses thumped dummies back to a practice pulse as Tasha counted off compressions. The parking lot filled with chrome and bondo and stories of engines that outlived the romances they carried. Darius stood behind a dish pit wearing a grin and a damp apron, declaring himself king of suds. Food trucks' griddles hissed. Quarter jars filled with votes and fingerprints. The choir sang beneath a banner that said simply, "For the kids." By August, the scoreboard fund had a number that made the principal stop mid-sentence. The banner company stopped calling. Finish. Well hung the new board without a logo beneath it, a black face that lit numbers and left souls alone. When the first game tipped, the gym roared through the sound system and past the sheetrock. Noise that felt like clean weather. Lily worked the book at the scorer's table, pencil tapping. Her hair pulled back in a way that made Michael see the baby she had been, and the woman she was. Almost. He tightened a loose faceplate and let the moment seat. Life did the thing it does. It threaded joy and test through the same week. A client check bounced while a subcontractor showed up with an invoice that didn't match the work. He felt the old itch, the blue thought. One weekend, one heater. He didn't honor it with a debate. He called Ben, who answered with a breath and a sentence that had saved many men. "Say the verse," Ben said. Michael exhaled and let the words drop like anchors. John, chapter 14, verse 27. "Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you." He called the client, offered a payment plan that protected his crews, and told the subcontractor he'd pay what was true. The weather passed without drama because he didn't invite lightning. Hannah learned his house the way good nurses learn a ward. Where the tape lives, which drawer sulks, the sound the washing machine makes before it demands a coin. She hung a calendar beside the green-checked one. Smaller boxes for meals to deliver to new moms, and the shifts where she'd get home too late for anything but toast. They kept their promise to walk slow. When tired made them short, they used the sentence the circle had taught them. One small, measurable thing before Friday. Apologies, laundry, a car oil change, a night on the porch without phones. Nate came out of Orange weeks later with a thin backpack and a face that had forgotten how to trust daylight. He walked into Thursday with his hat in his hand. "Delete or detox?" he said at the break. Michael clapped him on the shoulder. "Yes." Detox had a bed. The circle put groceries in his cupboard that did not rattle like guilt. He got a job sweeping at a machine shop where the floor shine mattered to a man who had learned excellence in the Navy and refused to forget it. Nate put his phone in a safe at home during the hours the itch howled. When he collected 30 days, he didn't brag. He stacked chairs and found the broom. A new test came sideways through Lily. A boy with a sweet smile and a phone heavy with parlays. He waited in the driveway, nervous politeness wrapped in cologne. Michael noted the cap pulled low, the glance down when a notification lit. He didn't lecture. He shook the boy's hand and looked him in the eye long enough for honesty to feel invited. After the movie, Lily sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water ringed by condensation. "He bets," she said, rolling the word like a pebble on her tongue. "He says it's just for fun." Michael breathed, steady. "What do you think?" She watched the circle of water grow. "I think I want fun that isn't a cliff." He nodded, gratitude a warm thing. "Then say that out loud," he said. She did 2 days later, and the boy shrugged and drifted. Boundaries are a kind of rescue most teenagers only learn by borrowing courage. She returned his jacket folded and her piece intact. On a rain-polished morning, Michael stood under a hardware store awning with a stranger who studied the envelope board, where offers and odd jobs nested under pushpins. The man had the look of someone who'd walked a long way inside. "You Mike?" he asked. "Sometimes," Michael said. The man smiled like he'd found the right page. "Heard you've got a table where chairs scrape and nobody lies." Michael laughed. "We do. Coffee's bad and hot. Thursday, 7. The man hesitated, eyes climbing the window like a ladder. What if I don't know what to say? Say that, Michael answered. We're good with the quiet between. Work sent him to a rural church with a sagging bell tower. The pastor was young and earnest, the kind of man who wore his tie like he'd been told to by someone he respected. We can't hear it anymore, the pastor said, pointing up to the weathered wood. Storm got the brace. Michael climbed, each rung a conversation with gravity. At the top, he found rot disguised by paint, a metaphor he was tired of, but still grateful for. He measured and cut and set the brace. When the rope finally pulled true and the bell called air into song, the town heard it. The clanging reminder that joy is often a repair. The pastor laughed like a kid. You know, he said, Luke chapter 15, verse 10, says there is joy before the angels of God over one sinner who repents. He tugged the rope again. Feels like they loaned us the bell for a minute. Back in the small booth, Michael confessed something that surprised even him. I still feel angry when I pass the billboards, he said. At the companies. At the math that ate my house. The voice did not hurry him past it. Romans chapter 12, verse 21, it said, Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Bless with better. Keep building tables. Fund scoreboards without hooks. Teach boys to weld instead of wager. Forgive their marketing with your making. He breathed and let the council seat like a beam. He walked out into afternoon light that had the decency to be ordinary. On a fall Friday, the school gym pulsed with a noise that tried for chaos and landed on celebration. The new scoreboard threw clean numbers. No logo winked beneath it. No small print whispered. Lily, at the scorer's table, lifted her pencil and looked across to where Michael stood with a volunteer's badge and a rag for wiping sweat off the ball when it rolled into a corner. She caught his eye and mouthed a tiny, exaggerated thank you. He felt more than saw. He touched 2 fingers to the brim of a hat he wasn't wearing. After the game, under a sky practicing winter, he walked the long way to the truck past the river. The bridge held. Of course it did. His phone buzzed with a text from Nate. 60 days. Ben chimed in. Tortoise. Elena added, Matthew 5:9. Blessed are the peacemakers. Hannah texted, warm soup at home. Lily sent a picture of a scoreboard with perfect zeros and a caption, first to clear. He laughed, gratitude spilling easy. On Sunday evening, he found the fellowship hall empty, but for a single chair under a light that had not learned about timers. He set 2 more chairs beside it, a bench formed from habit. He placed index cards and a pen on the table, neat as tools. Then he poured coffee into a pot that hissed like an old hymn and waited, because some kinds of faithfulness look exactly like that. Chairs ready, light on, door unlocked. A sentence practiced until it becomes the shape of your life. Footsteps came. Rubber soles, hesitant leather, a squeak that wanted oil. Men and women filtered in with weather in their pockets and stories that needed a room that didn't hurry. Michael smiled and gestured at the chairs. He didn't lead with a speech. He led with presence. And when the circle settled, and the coffee cooled, and the quiet made space for courage, he said the only opening line he trusted with strangers and sons, and the man he used to be. You will need help. We will help you. The circle filled. Faces he knew, and faces he'd soon learn. A roofer with sun-split knuckles. A barista with a tremor that had started in February. A retired cop whose eyes kept taking attendance on doors. Michael laid the index cards down like a quiet ritual. One small, measurable thing before Friday. he said, and pens clicked like insects at dusk. Midweek, a letter came from the state. A consumer settlement against a sports book he'd never even used. The check inside was $84.13, a number that looked like joke money against the ledger he had once carried. He tacked it to the corkboard under the tortoise with a note in block letters. Beans. By Saturday, the pantry shelves wore a new row of cans, bright labels facing out like tiny declarations. At Lily's senior awards night, the gym smelled like flowers and fresh wax. The new scoreboard glowed idle zeros, a clean face with no winks under the clock. Michael sat halfway up the bleachers with Hannah and Rachel on either side, civilization written in seating. The principal, who had learned the town's nickname for the Finish Well crew, called Lily's name for a small scholarship no one expected. She walked up steady, accepted an envelope, and turned to wave in the general direction of all her people. Later, at a card table set with store cupcakes, she handed Michael the envelope to open. Inside, enough for books, a note that said, "For the girl who keeps score and looks up." He swallowed and nodded like a man agreeing with a verdict he wanted. Nate made 60 days and then, one Friday, missed a call. The circle left a chair empty. On Saturday, Michael found him at a park bench with a phone face down and a jaw set too hard. They walked the path twice, 3 times, until words cooled from anger to confession. "I stood in the doorway and listened for the noise," Nate said. "I didn't go in." Michael bumped his shoulder like brothers do when they want to say good without breaking a man with praise. "Doorways count," he said. Matthew chapter 5, verse 6. "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Keep your appetite." Work took Michael out to a farm road where a mailbox leaned like an old man. A widow stood in her yard with a list written in careful loops. A hinge that wobbled. A step that gave. A latch that never caught. He fixed all 3 with a drill, a plane, and patience, and she paid him with 2 jars of peaches and a story about a tractor that used to start on the second try unless you threatened it with a wrench. On the drive back, he passed a new billboard where the quarterback had been. A local bank had bought the space. The ad featured a high school kid in a cap and gown, and 3 words simple enough for a town to believe. "We saved for this." He laughed alone and turned the radio down so he could hear the silence better. He went back to jail on a Tuesday when thunder rehearsed on the horizon. The same room. Different men. One asked if there was a verse for a father who'd used up his welcome. Michael told him the one that had chased him home. "Luke, chapter 15, verse 20, he said. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion and ran. The only thing faster than your losses is the Father's love. The young man's mouth worked once without sound. He nodded, slow, like someone learning the choreography for hope. Summer rolled over into a heat that made metal talk. The crews took water breaks like sacrament. Miles, now full-time, ran spreadsheets that fed job tickets that fed families. Luis wrote, "Finish well" on a whiteboard and drew a box under it. Vacation fund. $10 per paycheck per man. It would take a year to matter. It mattered that day. Hannah's shifts went long. Michael learned to leave the porch light and a note that said simply, "Toast in the bread box." They moved like people who had agreed to share weather reports. Clear. Crosswind. Storm at 3. When they snapped at each other, they fixed it with the same tool they used on budgets and beams. One small, measurable thing before Friday. An apology spoken in the hallway. A sink emptied. A half hour with no screens and both feet on the same porch board. Lily stood in a driveway with her hands on a hatchback that would be hers if it passed a mechanic who had the kindness to be thorough. I don't need new, she said. I need honest. Michael smiled because she had just named his theology. They took the car to Tasha's mechanic, who crawled under and called back over his shoulder. It's what it says it is. Honest passed. One evening, Rachel and Mark sat across from him at a diner that did pancakes late and Mercy quietly. We're moving, Rachel said, lines around her eyes that friendliness had carved. Mark's job, 2 hours north, new school for Lily. The sentence lowered itself into the room. Michael breathed and found the truth. I hate the distance, he said, and I will make it work. They set calendars in front of coffee mugs and played logistics until it sounded like love. Weekends stacked, a spare room at Michael's, a promise about midweek calls, a plan for telescopes packed in a trunk. Elena asked him to bless a couple whose vows had been postponed for reasons that had multiplied like rabbits. He stood with them in the chapel, fingers on a ribbon-wrapped bouquet, and said the only blessing he trusted. Matthew chapter 6, verse 33. He spoke over 2 hands laced. Seek first the kingdom. Slow is holy. We're with you. The builder's circle tool library outgrew its closet. Earl grumbled about a bigger dolly and smiled while he grumbled. A carpenter who'd once pawned his planer brought it back signed out under his own name, like a man reclaiming vocabulary. Darius hit 9 months and started a dishwashing crew for teenagers on probation, dishes and dignity, and a playlist that kept suds moving. Hector paid his landlord on the first 3 months in a row and brought 2 cucumbers from a first garden that wouldn't obey anyone's schedule but God's. On a dusk blue Sunday, Michael walked the bridge with Lily one last time before her move. The water wore the sky like a borrowed dress. I'm afraid of lonely, she said, the sentence coming out sideways like breath on a cold morning. He nodded. Me too, he said. But we know what to do. We tell on it. We set a chair. We invite somebody in. She bumped his arm. You'll set 3 chairs, she said, teasing him back into courage. They stopped at the note tucked in the brace where the inspector had written, held. He slid the paper out and let her read it again. It's true, even when we're not standing on it, she said. He put it back because some truths are meant to stay where they do their work. Move day smelled like tape and goodbye. He lifted boxes and carried lamps wrapped in towels and took one last look at the patch of wall where Lily had measured inches in pencil notches. In the driveway, Rachel hugged him in the quick, respectful way of people who have signed a peace treaty with their lives. Mark shook his hand. Lily took his face in both palms and said, Stars without street lights, as if it were both a memory and an assignment. He touched his forehead to hers and answered, Always. The house learned new quiet. Michael filled it with small sounds that didn't pretend. 2 mugs, 1 sink, a pen on paper. He set the Thursday chairs earlier than usual that week. Lamps low, coffee stubborn. People came. Nate with 68 days and a new way of holding a broom. A teacher who only gambled on silence when his wife asked hard questions. A woman who kept her phone in a bread box. They told on their weather. They prayed short. They left with ink on index cards and a steady step. Late that night, Michael stood in the doorway of the fellowship hall and looked back at the table. 3 chairs still pulled out, pens scattered, a pot half full. Light edging the room like a benediction that belonged to no one and everyone. He thought of the borrowed van, the first free bet, the hard numbers on a kitchen table, the booth with the lattice window, the sentence that had built him a life 1 inch at a time. He whispered it into the empty room, not as a performance, but as inventory. You will need help. We will help you. Outside, the town held its breath and then exhaled. Sprinklers ticking, a dog making his rounds, A train testing its horn 2 streets over. Somewhere, a billboard changed, and somewhere else, a boy put down his phone because a girl told him cliffs weren't her idea of fun. In a small house with a steady roof, a man who had learned to love slow set an extra chair on a porch and pointed a telescope at the slice of sky he could reach. The moon obliged. So did peace. And when footsteps came up the walk, hesitant leather, rubber soles, a squeak that wanted oil, he didn't ask for credentials or speeches. He opened the door, because that's what rock under a house allows a man to do.